Are you a mom struggling to guide your little ones in understanding and regulating their emotions while you're also on your own journey of healing and growth? We see you. You are not alone. Welcome back to Connection Over Perfection. I am Amber McCrae, your therapeutic nutritionist and host, here to guide you to connect after trauma. Today's guest, Jennifer Ginty, a mental health advocate and creator of My Moody Monster, who is here to share some tips and stories to help us understand how to better be there for our kiddos and ourselves. She's been where we are through hell and back a few times. She's learned so much about healing and being a parent along the way. Jennifer had a moment where she really wished that she had something to help her deal with her feelings. So she came up with this really cool idea that helps kids and adults express their feelings in a healthy way. Jennifer, welcome to the show, and we are so honored to have you here with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Amber. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, so before we jump into that big question, can you just share with us the really cool idea that you had that's helping so many adults, teachers, therapists, kids with healthy coping mechanisms and skills, and really to understand their emotions and that all emotions are valid?
Sure. So, I'm a single mom and I live with complex PTSD and depression from childhood trauma. And one day I was in a therapeutic group and I was so frustrated with my symptoms. And I said to them, I was like, I wish I had a monster that I could just rip apart, throw across the room, bang against the wall. And people in the group were like, you should have that. And so, I went home and I'm not a seamstress, not, I don't tailor anything like that, but I made this, monster that had Velcro for the head, arms, and legs. And later I got into an accelerator program where I really worked on what I now call my Moody Monster. So
Mm.
Moody is a pull apart plush toy, and they're there to let children get all of that pent up frustration out in a safe way. And the best part about using Moody is that kids can let that out and not have that shame spiral
Mm.
afterwards if they've had that, if they've had a huge blow up and they feel badly about what happened when, you know what, their emotions are valid. There's every reason that they should feel that way. Our bodies, our minds tell us when we need to feel something because it's a mechanism for us to maybe take care of ourselves. And, to sometimes our feelings tell us when there is a threat. So the best part about Moody is that children can put them back together again with a
Mm.
caregiver, a parent, a teacher, therapist, and talk about what happened that time. What made you so upset? What can we do next time? Can we create a coping skill that will help you get through this big feeling that you need to get out? So I've been testing Moody, and I actually just sold out of my first batch of Moody's.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And I'm finding that classrooms have a need for Moody. Therapists are using Moody not only with the children, but with the parents, because therapists are finding that Moody can help parents to model for their kids, show them that they can use Moody and that it's okay. They're not going to get yelled at. They're not bad, quote, bad, for the feeling that they have. And parents are seeing that they're able to communicate so much better with their kids when they're able to let that out and feel safe doing it.
Jennifer, this is huge. And I know that this is kind of off topic, but this just came into my head. I just had a whole 2 hour discussion yesterday on TikTok about anger and how much guilt and shame is attached when we let that anger out. And when you were talking about Moody and just being able to honor that and have something that you can physically get that energy out and honor it, and then also come back and reconnect and repair that. What a huge difference. Like, what if we would have had this as kids? I mean, this
Exactly.
is why you're saying it's so huge, even for adults.
Mhm.
You know, I just went through something traumatic and I'm like, Yeah, damn, Moody would have been amazing to have to tear apart and put back together.
Yeah.
It's huge. This is
Yeah,
huge.
I have friends, even my lawyer has a Moody and says she uses it regularly. So it really does help for all ages. So when people ask me, what are the age for? I'm like 0 to 100, you know?
Right, right. Because we all have those feelings and they are valid. And I think that this is something that we really don't talk about in the society is that it's okay to be angry and anger is essential and important. And it is also the first part of grief and moving through so many emotions. And you're right. I think what we see is a society that, tries to eliminate anger. And in doing so, when we eliminate and suppress those emotions, we also eliminate joy and happiness and all these other emotions. So I absolutely love what you're doing. This is amazing. And so I know so many of my listeners are moms out there. Jennifer, going through what you went through, you've experienced childhood abuse and, now as a parent healing from complex trauma, how in the world do you approach raising your children with that care and support, especially when you never really experienced it yourself?
Yeah, I think I need to start kind of at the beginning. When everything came out about the abuse in my family, there was just a lot of pushing away of really talking about it and even going into therapy. I never really put myself in a place of healing. I use the idea of, I used to say a lot, not yet, because, like, not yet, because right now I'm in high school. Uh,
Mm,
Not yet. I'm in college. Not yet. I just started a career. I have a family. And I really pushed that healing journey off for so long. And I think part of it was fear to actually get into the trauma and really look at it because that's really scary
right.
to look at the trauma that you've been through. And there's the fear that you won't be able to move forward, that you won't be able to connect, won't be able to deal with the things that are around you that you need to cope with, especially as a parent. So I spent a lot of time pushing off that healing journey. And I wish that I had started it a lot earlier, even before I had children, honestly, because I think it would have been easier being in that healing journey and being a parent.
Mm,
Like you said, I didn't have really a model for appropriate parenting. So I was kind of left out in space, in my own, air, my own pod, I guess, of not knowing exactly how to raise a child in, an appropriate atmosphere. I had my husband and he was great, but it was difficult, especially since my first child actually had a lot of behavioral issues.
yeah. I want to stop you there because I know so many parents are right there, are right there where you're talking about. And I know that it's so important to talk about the healing, but can you just sit with us in that moment of maybe what you were feeling?
Yes, I did feel very much alone. I had had a baby boy. And it wasn't going great. He wasn't sleeping well. He didn't have colic, but he had very difficult time with the digestion, that kind of thing.
Mm,
And the things that were happening, the behaviors that he was developing, I kept saying to myself, there's something wrong. And I talked to people, and I was using my instincts, saying I think something's wrong, and people would tell me, oh, he's just a boy, it's okay. That's just how boys are. And then I would think to myself, well,
mm.
if this is having a boy, I don't know if I can really be a parent.
Wow.
Yeah, I felt alone. I felt scared. The fear was huge for me. And then
Right.
fighting the anger that I would have being in the situation and knowing I love this child. I want this child. He's my baby. And, trying to unfold and uncover what was necessary for me to be the mom that he needed and who I needed to be for myself.
Yeah, that's such a huge struggle, and I know I mean, that strikes a chord with me, just being in those moments where you can't seem to find the answers. I know that my son, very similar situation, and he wasn't sleeping, I couldn't put him down, and you go through this period of feeling very crazy. Well, I did. I felt very crazy. Like I don't know what to do. I'm not sleeping. I can't function and nobody really understanding in that space. I remember reaching out and doctors and family were just like, "Oh, this is just normal." And I'm like, "This doesn't feel normal." And eventually I did. I reached out to like a MOPS group and the lady on the phone was I mean, I just burst into tears because I finally felt heard. And I think that that's what we want today is for these moms, these parents to feel heard that you're not alone and we see you.
Absolutely. And now my oldest is 20, and we have a great relationship. We understand each other. I do things that I never received when I was a child. I tell my son every day when he goes off to work, I love you, be safe,
Mm.
and have a good night, because he works a night job. And
Mm.
I never heard those words when I was young. I didn't think that that was an actual thing that parents did. I didn't know
Mm.
that the words "I love you" was something that you can say every day to a child. But when I had my baby, I knew I loved him, and I knew I wanted him to feel so much more love than I had ever felt in my childhood. And I wanted that for the both of us, because I don't know how I feel amazing when I tell my children that I love them. It feels
Mm.
so incredible to me, and I think it feels really good to them too. Now I know that they've never not heard it, so they don't know, but I
Mm.
know the difference. I know that I'm giving them something more, something that I know they should have every day of their life.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. So Jennifer, how did you get to that point? I know you talked a little bit about therapy and stuff like that. That's a huge shift from not receiving it and going through this very alone period of raising your son and trying to figure that out. What do you think switched for you, or what took place to where you were able to begin that journey and learn and start implementing those things?
I think that it was instinct from the get go. Now, instinct for someone who's been through complex trauma is a very difficult thing, because we don't necessarily trust our instincts. We're always second guessing our instincts,
That's huge.
right?
That's so huge.
So,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, you could trust your instincts as a child and then not know what will happen with your abuser.
Hmm.
So I often, throughout my life, I've doubted my instincts, and at that point, though, I think there was such a bond between my child and I that I knew that they needed that protection, that care, that love, even in the hardest times that we've had. My son, when he was 4, he was diagnosed with Asperger's, and it was a shock, but it was also I was right.
I knew, like, right, yeah,
Right?
confirmation, a
Right.
validation, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It was validation, and you know, but my mother instincts really did kick in. And no matter what kind of distress I was in, I knew how I felt as a child, and I never wanted my children to feel that way.
Mm, that's huge. So, kind of going back to that instincts and being able to trust, because I know so many, especially if they've experienced, sexual trauma as a child, being disconnected from yourself, very similar, and not really knowing what the next steps, what to trust. What would you say to them?
Hmm. I think I would tell them that the most important thing is to put the oxygen mask on yourself.
Mm. It's so hard to do.
It really is. It is. And I suffered through that, not putting the oxygen mask on and not giving myself that chance to start that healing journey. I think that if you are having trouble with trusting your instincts and understanding what you know is right for your child and for yourself, I really do think that it's important to talk to someone outside of your family circle,
Yeah.
whether that be in a group of other women going through that or a therapist. Starting that work is going to change the way that you feel about yourself as a parent,
Can't speak any truer words. I mean, I remember,
right?
yeah, when I started this journey, which is why I do what I do, was because I was disconnected from my daughter. And so I went searching for different therapists and counselors that resonated. And finally, I got to one, and which she's still my counselor to this day after over 10 years. And she looked me in the
Mhm.
eye and she said, because I was looking for a counselor for my daughter, right? Because she was having trouble. And she said, Amber, if you want to help your daughter, you will sit in this chair every week because there's nothing wrong with her. You just don't know how to connect to her. And I was like, oh, shit.
Yes, it's kind of a little bit of a gut punch,
Oh,
right?
it for
But
sure. It
it's a
was the
wake up
biggest
call.
piece of humble pie I think I've ever eaten in my life.
Yeah, yeah. And it's okay to swallow that pie.
Yeah, right.
You need to take care of your, like I work in internal family systems.
Mhm.
And sometimes I have to look at it as you need to take care of little Jen
Yes.
in order to help your children.
So with the Moody Monster, so
Yes.
many of us parents are reparenting ourselves. I'm getting emotional. Reparenting ourselves, right? Because we've never experienced this. We've never been allowed to feel, to express emotions, right? We don't even know what that means. How in the world are we supposed to help our children when we don't even know what that means? And so, like you said, going back, and I had to, people can call it shadow work, inner child work. I feel like it's all kind of the same, just different lingo. Is we're all going back and learning how to love ourselves in a way that we've never received, a very safe, validating, non-judgmental love. So one of the amazing things about the Moody Monster is for us as adults, like you said, to model that for our kids and be angry, be sad, hold the Moody Monster, rip that shit apart. Like we've never been allowed to do that. And so I think that that's kind of what we're talking about here today is, parenting ourselves while we're parenting our kids.
Yes. And I don't know. I don't know how others feel about this, but when we were children in our generations before this, we were told not to make people uncomfortable with our feelings.
Yes, huge. That just gave me chills.
Don't be an angry girl.
Mm.
Don't make this person uncomfortable with your tears, right? And so we were taught to push down our feelings. And when you tend to do that, you tend to develop an alternative emotion to that to cover the first one. Now, in DBT, I do a therapy called DBT. And in this, they call it primary and secondary emotion.
Yes.
And if you feel your primary emotion, but that emotion is scary or you feel out of control, you can switch to the secondary emotion, which isn't the appropriate emotion for that situation. And so I use this amazing DBT skill called checking the facts. And it asks the questions that you're in the situation and you answer the questions without an emotion, just looking at it head on. And at the end of the questions, you can figure out what that primary emotion is supposed to be. And if you're not feeling that, you're feeling the secondary emotion, then it's time to look at that primary emotion. You can switch yourself back and work through the emotion that's supposed to be a part of that situation.
Just real quick, after you're done listening to this amazing episode on this pretty freaking sweet podcast, give it a 5-star rating, and then head on over to the Podcast Connection Network and check out all the other amazing podcasts that we got over there. This is a plug. I got one too. It's called The Nonchalant Perfectionist. Check us all out. The link, you know where the link's going to be in the episode's description.
Right?
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree. And this is so much that we miss this, right? Because oftentimes anger, yes, is what comes out. But if we can get curious, like you're saying, am I really angry, or am I really scared, or am I sad, or am I disappointed? And that primary emotion is often sadness and fear.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time that it comes down to, I don't know about in your experience, fear of abandonment, fear of being alone. That's real. It's so real, but that's vulnerable. And for so many people, like you said, we weren't allowed to feel that. And in fact, you were not supposed to feel that, because vulnerability was a sign of weakness. And that was taboo. Again.
Yes. Yes, it is. Fear is, like you said, a lot of people see fear as weakness. And, when you see fear as a weakness, you want to switch to something that you feel more in control of, which can often be anger.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has a different emotion that they feel most comfortable in, which is most likely that secondary emotion that you go to hide and to push down that first one that you're supposed to be feeling.
Right. It's more of our protective emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, this feels really vulnerable. I'm really scared. I'm going to do anger so that you can't get any closer to me.
Yep.
Well, and I love what you said about asking questions. And I think I don't know about for you, but for me, this was such a pivotal and still pivotal for my healing journey, life journey, whatever you want to call it, is being curious. What am I feeling? What's happening to my body? And I also love this about, the Moody Monster, because you can use this with your kids, is where are you feeling this anger? Can you show me on the Moody Monster,
Yep.
right? Where because oftentimes kids don't know, and if we make it fun, it will get done too. Also, if you make it to where it's not this so serious, because kids tend to, that doesn't feel comfortable. But if you make it a little bit more fun, they're like, oh, okay, this is something that we can kind of get on board with. How do you feel about that?
I think that's totally true. And one of the things that I do for the Moody, from my business, is that I have a YouTube channel that I do Moody Talks. And every month I pick an emotion. And for the 4 weeks of the month, I do coping skills. But the first week, I go in and I say, okay, what words do you use for this emotion? And
Oh,
I
I love
want you to
that.
write down those words that you use, and we're going to put them on an intensity scale. So let's say fear, like in the middle of the road, is scared. You put that in the middle of your intensity scale. And when you come out of putting all your words in that scale, you're able to know when a word pops in your head about how you feel, how intensely you're feeling that emotion. So I think that's really important. And I also go through body sensations that you may feel when you have this emotion, because it's very important to know what your body is reacting to. And understanding these words, these actions you may take, these body sensations, you're able to better understand where you're at and what you need to cope.
That's huge. You guys don't worry. The link to that YouTube channel will be linked in the description. Also, in talking about parenting and teaching our kids this, I think oftentimes there's a lot of guilt and shame attached that we didn't receive this and we don't really know how to help our kids navigate that because we're learning. But I think that that could be a beautiful gift if we're able to have that paradigm shift, because oftentimes if we already know how to do something, we want to show and we want to teach our kids. And that's very different than being the example and doing it with them. I think that that's a very different experience. Not that one is better than the other, but I think that there is a beautiful opportunity. And I don't think that we have to be so far ahead of our kids when we're teaching this. We can be right along with them. And I think that it's so important to always continue, even if you are in tune. I still check in. It's still important for me to check in. It's something I will always be doing. Like, where am I feeling this right now? And being that example and doing it in the moment with your kids is very different than even just asking them, okay, well, just tell me where you feel it, is being that example. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I think that being the example for your children is the way that you both grow, and not only grow as yourselves, but grow as, a relationship. I think that children need to understand that their parents are human just like them, so that they know, wow, they're human. I can be human too. And it kind of takes away that perfectionist feeling that a child may be feeling, that they need to be perfect for their parents. And that's because they don't see their parents being human and having emotions and needing a break, something like that. They need to be able to know that everyone around them is just like them.
Right. That's huge. And we can tell them all the time, oh, we make mistakes. But if we don't make the mistakes and we don't repair with them, they're not going to understand. It's like, do as I say, not as I do. Right. And I love what you're saying is because it is okay to make mistakes. If we are not okay with making mistakes, how are we going to convey that to our children? Right. And so this having kids definitely is a way to work on and bring your own stuff to the surface of what you need to work on. But that's what I found is that when I make a mistake, those are actually the magical moments in teaching our kids how to repair and reconnect. And I think that there's so much power in that. And I struggle with perfectionism. I think I always will. And I see it in my kids, that need for control, right? So it's in those moments where I can be vulnerable and go to them, is showing them, hey, it's okay to be vulnerable and we can do this. And we never are going to be able to remove triggers or mistakes. It's not possible, no matter how hard we try, no matter how perfect we try to be. And so it's about learning how to repair. And so I love that you mentioned that about Moody also, is the repair part, which is often something that we don't talk about either.
Right. Again, in our generation, we were sent to our room. We were, told what we had to do to, quote, repent for what we did,
Yes.
right? That's not the way to create a relationship with a child. Sitting down and talking about, what happened is really an important part of your connection with your child. Because, in the past years, therapy is like you need to say you're sorry to your children. And yes, very much so. But you can't just walk up to your child and say, I'm sorry for what I did.
Right.
There has to be understanding between the two of you of what happened and why you're saying I'm sorry. It's not just throwing out the words I'm sorry to your child. It's understanding each other and telling your child, I'm not perfect. And here I am reaching out to you so that we can talk about how I'm not perfect, but I'm willing to tell you that and say I'm sorry for something that I did. And I think that makes it easier for children to turn around and say they're sorry.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think there's another piece to that is really that validation of, and I think as parents we get so scared and so defensive um for our own insecurities, right? And so it's hard for us to just hear our children and what they're experiencing. I actually do not like the word respect because I feel like when we use it in the terms of my child needs to respect me, is that it's sending a message. I don't like the way that you're making me feel, and you need to stop that because I need you to be okay so that I can be okay. And I think that there's so much that happens in that it really robs, it's emotion stealing, right? We aren't allowing our children to feel. And then we are sending the message that they are responsible for our emotions and our happiness and our okayness. And that is a really big burden to put on our children.
Mm-hmm.
That's so huge. And so I think being able to work on ourselves and like, oh, something really big is happening for us. What's happening for me? Okay, I'm feeling this way. And then being able to hear how your child is feeling. And I think that validation really just, repeating back to them how they're feeling, I think gets lost in that a lot of people think that validation means enabling or encouraging that behavior or that emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Like if our kids are angry and we try to validate that, like, but for me, it's just like, dude, I see that something really huge is happening for you. What's going on? Let's talk about
Yeah.
it. Like I see you're super upset about that. You know what? If my toy got crushed, I would be upset too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. Absolutely.
And I think there's so much fear too in the generations and what's happening. I don't know if you've seen this, but we have, you know, the generation, say, probably 45, maybe 50 to
Mm-hmm.
70 that are really in that older mentality. And then you have this newer generation coming up where it feels like it's black or white, like no boundaries or all boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if we can somewhere in the middle, that we can allow emotions and still hold boundaries.
Yeah.
Like I know that this happened to me. This mix of feeling really judged in the way that I was trying to parent because I knew that I wanted something different, like you said. I knew that I didn't want to continue raising my kids this way, and I had to do something different because for me, the most important thing was connection, being connected to them, helping them feel connected to themselves, one another, myself. And so, in that, I had to kind of throw out some of that old school programming.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, people thought that there was no boundaries. But I believe that you can say, hey, and I use this example because this just happened the other day, is my son got really upset. He didn't want to clean his room. And I was like, all right, dude, you don't have to, but we're not continuing our day and we're not going to play electronics until, we take care of our stuff. And he got mad. And I was like, I get it. It sucks. I don't like cleaning either.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah, you could be mad, but we're not going to play. And then he threw something at me. And I was like, dude, like, I totally get you're really upset. We don't throw things at each other. Like, you can hit the pillow. This is where the Moody Monster would have been great.
Right, right.
Rip him apart. It's totally cool. You can be mad, but we don't throw things at each other. It's that duality of having boundaries, but honoring emotions. And I think that there's so much confusion and fear in that switch. What do you think the fear is?
No.
I've heard respect over and over again, like a lack of
Right, right, right.
respect. But I think that if we get down to it, the real fear is maybe that I don't know. Now that I'm thinking about it out
Yeah,
loud.
and that's totally fine. That's absolutely fine not to know, right? This is where we're getting
Yes.
curious,
Yes.
and the way that we talk to our children again is how we stop that shame spiral from happening for kids because when we had, I went through terrible shame spirals as a kid, and when you get into toxic shame, then you get into this part where your child thinks that they're a bad person.
Right. Then they take that view on as themselves. It's now a self view of how they are, who they are.
Right. Right. Yeah. And so I think that it's really important, like you said, dude, I get it. I get this. We don't throw things at each other. And here, like you said, here, take a pillow, do whatever you're going to do. That is a step towards allowing your child to feel their emotions and not to feel that shame, because the shame is what in the end changes a child completely. Toxic
Yes.
shame will change your child's perception of themselves and perceptions of how others look at them.
Right. And do you think that that plays also a part into trusting
Yes,
yourself?
absolutely.
I mean, I think that that's kind of where that begins, is not being able to trust yourself, and that shame of like, okay, I don't know what to feel because what I'm feeling is not right.
Right,
So I must
right.
not
And
be
so
right.
DBT, so they say all emotions are valid, which is very true. And shame is also an actually very valid emotion. Shame is described
Mhm.
as the feeling you get when you've gone against a social structure, a social group's ideals. And that's okay, because, let's say you see a child playing with your child in a sandbox, and your child takes away the toy of the other child and like runs off with it. Now you go to your child and you say, we don't take other people's toys. We don't run away with other people's toys. You need to ask if you want to use it. That child is going to feel a little tinge of shame. And that's okay, because they're learning the lesson of their society's values.
Would you say that also shame is very essential, because when we go against our own
Mhm.
values, knowing the difference between guilt
Exactly.
and shame and how to
Right. So
navigate
in
that.
DBT, guilt is going against your own personal values, where shame is going through, against society's values. So people confuse those a lot, but I think it's a very important thing to understand the difference.
Can you go ahead and say that again? Because I think that that's really big, because I think so many of our listeners struggle with guilt and shame. And I think that this is really huge. So I just want to pause for a moment and have you kind of repeat what you said, because this is
So
huge.
guilt in DBT is considered the emotion that you feel when you go against your own values. When you do something that you would personally not see yourself ever doing, or you make the decision, even though you know something is wrong in your mind, that you're going to do it anyway, and you feel that guilt afterwards. So that's also a very valid feeling to feel. And shame is when you do something against your social group's values. And like I said, it could be playground rules, right? That's one social construct. There are so many social constructs in our lives. Socially, we have family construct, we have classroom, we have playground, we have all these others for children. And you need to understand those values to live in that society. So when you go against that value for the society and you're told that that's happened, feeling that shame isn't a bad thing. It's a moment of realization that you shouldn't do what is against the societal value, right? As an
Yeah,
adult, if
that's
you
huge.
don't like that social value, you don't have to be in that group, right? I always say that
Right.
to people. I'm like, well, if you don't like what's going on in societal group that you're in, you don't have to be a part of it. Children don't necessarily get that choice, unfortunately, as I'm thinking about it. But that's up to the parents
Right.
to understand what social circles your child should be in. If a parent sees that a child is having a hard time in a social group, asking the question, why is my child having a problem in this group, is really, really important, rather than saying, no, you shouldn't do that. You should be asking yourself, well, why is my child having a hard time in this group? And maybe this group just isn't for my child at this time in their life.
That's huge. Letting
Mm-hmm.
children have a voice.
Right.
I'm sorry, what? That it was a foreign concept. And along those lines, I allow my children to question and to
Yeah.
say no and to argue, because I say argue, but like to to say their point of view. And sometimes I do
Yeah. State
change
their
my
case.
mind. Yeah, exactly. Because I did not get that still learning who I am. If I can help my kids learn that many years earlier, by all means, I'm going to do that. And I think that that's a huge thing in that area.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, what going back to shame and guilt, those are very valid feelings. It's when they turn toxic that is the problem. Toxic guilt and toxic shame go to not that I've done something that doesn't, isn't in my value or in the social value to I'm a bad person.
That's huge. Right.
And that's not what you want for your child. That's not what you want for yourself. So you definitely don't want that for your child. So when you allow your child to let out their frustration in a safe way, that stops that shame spiral from happening, or at least it tries to.
So I have a question for the moms that are listening or the parents that are listening right now. What would you say to them who are struggling with that shame spiral themselves?
You got to give yourself grace. There's a reason why you feel this shame spiral, this toxic shame. And it's from years and years of experience with it and not being validated. Maybe you did something that wasn't great, but you're not a bad person for it. It goes back to healing, really. And it goes back to the parents needing to do that work and putting the oxygen mask on first. Uh,
Yeah, that's huge. I definitely agree. There's a book that, whatever you think about her, Oprah
yeah.
Winfrey and a neuroscientist wrote What Happened to
Yes.
Me.
Excellent book.
I think that that's the
Yes.
name.
What happened to
And
you?
I love that because the whole thank you. The whole premise is it's not what's wrong with me, which we hear. So, I mean, who hasn't said what is
Hmm.
wrong with me? But it's not what's wrong with you. It's what happened to you. Like you said, everything that you feel makes sense. It came from somewhere. And I think that that's so huge. And when you don't know, you
Right.
don't know. And so when you know better, you can do better. And for me, that was a huge phrase that really helped me with the guilt because I wish that I had known sooner, right? When my children were younger or before I had children, but we can't turn back
No.
that time. And so, but we can do better when we know
Yeah.
better. So Jennifer, this is huge. We're talking about guilt and shame as so valid emotions. And again, like we started with, anger is a valid emotion. It's all these taboo emotions that we have never really been allowed or validate. I mean, not allowed, but let alone validated that they're okay and they're essential and they make sense. I love what you're doing here. And I love this shifting of the mindset and helping parents help heal themselves and to be there for their kids. What would be one thing that you could offer to parents or moms today who are where you were in those moments of being alone?
I would say, depending on your background, to trust what you're feeling inside and give yourself the grace of being a parent isn't like suddenly your computer that has downloaded this whole map of how you parent throughout a child's life. We don't get that. Like I said, we're not computers. We have to give ourselves grace. We have to look back at our own history and why we feel the way we feel in that moment. Children are going to push buttons, right? Children are going to do things not only because they don't know or understand, but because they're asking for something when they push buttons too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Children do things that they think will give them the attention that they need at the time. So stepping back, giving yourself the grace, and communicating with your child how you feel and how they feel, and coming to a center together. In DBT, there's a wise mind, which is in the center of emotion mind and rational mind.
Mm.
And coming to that wise mind is through skills and through learning and through coping. That's how we get to the middle ground, not just for ourselves, but for our relationships as well. Parents and children have an interpersonal relationship, just as a parent does with another parent, or even a person has with their boss. We all have different interpersonal relationships that need to be handled in a way where both feel comfortable, both feel safe. And that's what your children are really asking for, is safety. And you need to also feel safe yourself. So it's important, if you're finding yourself having a lot of trouble coping with the way your children act, even their personality, it's important to, again, put that oxygen mask on and question why. And question if you need someone to help you, guide you through this as well. There's no reason not to ask for help. Now, again, the way I grew up, in the generation that I'm in, we were told to not ask for help because help is weakness, saying that you can't do something yourself. Don't do that to yourself. Give yourself the grace and the understanding that you need more to help you grow and to better understand yourself and your children. Reaching out and finding a tribe of parents, or finding a counselor or a therapist that you think matches with your needs is one of the most important things you can do for yourself and your child. You can't do this alone. And if you feel alone, then you need to reach out.
I couldn't agree more, Jennifer. Thank you so much. And I just want one more thing is you said safety. And for me, safety is mentally, emotionally, physically safe, feeling seen, heard, validated, valued. To me, that equals love and that equals safety. What would you say?
Exactly. It is. It really is. Safety is just the most important part of a human being's life. It's in our, what am the amygdala. Yes,
Amygdala.
thank you very much. An amygdala. But it's core. It's like that primordial part of us that
Right.
that we all need to feel safe. So when my child was younger, I didn't feel safe with him at
Mhm.
times because he was, his behaviors, he would yell, kick, punch, bite, those kind of things. I didn't feel safe with him. Well, what should I have asked myself in that situation, right? Rather than staying in that fear, reaching out to someone to help communicate to me and to him what's going on between us is important.
Jennifer, that is powerful. And I just, first of all, I want to say thank you for your vulnerability because that's not easy. And I know that's something most parents
I believe
experience
so.
at times, just like, I don't know how to be safe. I don't feel safe right now. I don't feel like I can keep my child safe. And I think that there's so much fear in what will happen if we communicate that. And I think we want to say that there are people out there, Jennifer, myself, that understand that that is very normal and natural to feel that way. And in fact, I don't know a mom or a parent that hasn't felt that
Yeah,
way.
I would say so. I would say there's a very large percentage of parents who have felt fear, felt scared about their situation, their surroundings.
And not
Right.
capable.
Yeah, very much so. And that's where, our shame of being weak and asking for help really does us a disservice.
Yeah. And what I think I hear you saying is that it's okay to not
Mhm.
know, and it's okay to be afraid. We can be afraid together, and we can not know together. We can do it
Yes.
together. And I believe that we are created for connection. And while we can possibly do it alone, we don't
No.
have to. We don't have to. And it's so much more fun.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You do not know what your friend who has, a child who's a year older than yours is going through. 'Cause most
Mm,
likely they're not telling you. You go on
exactly.
you go on Facebook, you go on Instagram, and you see all these wonderful moments and all this kind of stuff, and you don't see what's going on behind the scenes. We're all dealing with something. Being a parent
Right.
isn't this happy-go-lucky, we're in a fairy world and unicorns are teaching us how to talk about our problems.
And if somebody's saying that, they're for sure lying.
Right.
For sure.
It's a roller coaster. There's going to be ups and downs, and don't suffer through the downs. You
Yeah.
don't have to. We don't have to. We don't have to
No, we
suffer being
don't.
parents. And don't ever feel ashamed that you need to talk to someone about what's going on in your family, what's going on in your home. It's important to talk to people who understand so that they can tell you this is normal and we're going to figure out how to build coping skills for everyone in the family so that we can understand each other and move forward with our relationships.
Yeah, that was a game changer for me when my counselor was like, "Amber, makes so much sense. That's normal to feel that way." And I was like, "What?"
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny. It's so funny when you realize you're like, wait, that's normal?
There's other
Right.
people
This
feeling
is
this?
normal that I'm feeling this
Right.
way.
This is why we talk
Mhm.
about it so that you guys don't have to be alone and you can know that it's normal. We're here. We've been there. We are going through it. We're on this journey with you.
Exactly.
Jennifer, it has been an absolute pleasure having you here with your information and just your energy and your passion. Please, you guys, this will all be listed in the description, but please tell people where they can find you and
Sure.
Moody.
So you can find us on all the socials under My Moody Monster, which all one word. I have my YouTube channel, and that is also My Moody Monster. And you can also go on to mymoodymonster.com. Right now, I have a pre-sale going for Moody. I'm in the process of fundraising to buy a nice big batch, because that was a smaller batch, a big batch of Moody's to get out into the world.
Amazing. All right, definitely. We will check that out. Thank you, Jennifer, so much. And you guys, you're not alone. We see you and you matter. Hey there, beautiful souls. I'm Amber McCrae, your therapeutic nutritionist and emotionally focused therapy coach, dedicated to guiding you on your holistic wellness journey. If you're ready to reclaim your health, nourish your body, and cultivate deeper connections within yourself and others, let's chat. Schedule a free consultation today and let's explore how holistic nutrition and emotionally focused therapy can support you on your path to wellness. Schedule that free consultation now and take the first steps towards a healthier, happier you. Find the link to my link tree in the episode description below. The views and opinions expressed by myself and any guest on this podcast are solely ours and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of any organizations we are affiliated with. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as medical advice. As always, consult with a trusted healthcare professional regarding any medical conditions or concerns.